right, buddy?
Yeah, sure, kid. There you go.
And your wallet.
Nick, give him your wallet. Got a knife.
That's not a knife, that's a knife.
Crocodile Dundee wasn't just a comedy. It became a global phenomenon, winning hearts with its fearless bushman and outback humor.
Don't try to stop me.
I don't want to stop you, I just want to get past.
What?
I want to get by, you're in the way.
You're kidding.
No, I walk around here every day. Get away from all the noise and the traffic. Get up here and get the fresh air. You had the same idea yourself, did you?
I don't give a damn about the air.
But behind the laughs lies a darker side most fans have never heard. The story of this classic film is filled with bizarre inspirations, dangerous encounters, and secrets that never made it to the screen. We've uncovered 10 shocking revelations that reveal how risky, strange, and unexpected this movie really was, and one of them ends in tragedy. Are you ready to uncover what's been hidden? The lifeline that changed cinema. Few movie quotes have burned their way into pop culture quite like the legendary line from Crocodile Dundee, "That's not a knife, that's a knife." It's one of those moments that transcended the film itself, becoming part of everyday conversation, quoted and parodied endlessly for decades. Yet what most people don't realize is that the line wasn't even in the original script. Paul Hogan, ever the quick-thinking comedian, came up with it on set, proving once again that some of the best cinematic gold is found in the moment. The scene unfolds in New York when Mick Dundee and Sue are confronted by a group of muggers. One pulls out a switchblade, attempting to intimidate the bushman who, up to that point, had seemed like a harmless outsider in the big city. Rather than panicking, Hogan, as Dundee gives a sly grin, pulls out his massive Bowie knife and delivers the now famous line. The timing, the confidence, and the playful tone made it instantly memorable. Originally, the script simply had Dundee reacting with a generic retort before brandishing his knife. Hogan, with his background in comedy and improvisation, felt it needed something more. He riffed during rehearsals and dropped the line almost casually. The crew's laughter confirmed its brilliance, and it was quickly locked into the final cut. What started as an offhand quip became the centerpiece of one of the movie's most iconic sequences. An audience that once packed a theater now roars in laughter and delight when it is screened in the film. Humorously tough, it captures the essence of Mick Dundee. Imperturbable, clever, and just a little bit impudent. It has also served to showcase Hogan's reading of the atmosphere in any scene, then delivering something both effortless and unforgettable. The phrase would go on to live in infamy, repeated ad infinitum in commercials, skits, and pop culture. But still, decades later, a person who has never seen Crocodile Dundee knows the line. It is testimony to a rare, complete mastery of a single improvised line into the cultural psyche, standing shoulder to shoulder with other great movie quotes like, "Here's looking at you, kid," or "I'll be back." Hogan saw it as the magic of spontaneity. No carefully crafted, time-consuming writing exercise could have produced such brilliant dialogue. It came not from a well-thought-out line fit for a boardroom or a cinematic team of Hollywood writers. It came from instinct, humor, and timing, and in so doing imbued Crocodile Dundee with its most lasting heritage. Keep your jaw dropped, because the next twist takes the story in a whole new direction. Love story beyond the big screen. On screen, one of the most endearing elements of Crocodile Dundee was the chemistry between rugged bushman Mick Dundee and intrepid reporter Sue Charlton. Their romance felt natural, playful, and charged with genuine affection, so much so that audiences often wondered if the sparks were real. As it turned out, they were. Behind the cameras, Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski's connection mirrored the love story playing out in the script, blurring the line between fiction and reality. At the time of filming, Hogan was already a household name in Australia, known for his comedy and charisma. Linda Kozlowski, meanwhile, was a rising actress trained at Juilliard, looking for her breakout role. When she auditioned for the part of Sue, producers quickly noticed her easy chemistry with Hogan. She wasn't intimidated by his larger-than-life personality and had a sharp wit that matched his. Casting her turned out to be one of the film's most important decisions, not only for the story but for the lives of the actors themselves. As the two spent long days together on set, their bond deepened. The playful banter and lingering glances seen in the film weren't just acting, they reflected a growing affection off-screen. Crew members reportedly noticed the closeness between them, describing an undeniable warmth that went beyond professional performance. It was clear to many that the fictional love story was spilling into real life. The situation, however, was complicated. At the time, Hogan was married to his longtime wife, Noeline, with whom he had 5 children. The relationship with Kozlowski made tabloid gossip, adding another layer of drama external to the film. Finally, Hogan and Kozlowski went public with their romance. They were married in 1990 and stayed together for over 20 years until their divorce in 2014. For the fans, the real-life love story made that much more magic for the film's legacy. It helped strengthen the idea that Crocodile Dundee was not just a comedy about a bushman in New York, but also another story filled with real sentiments, depending on the real lives of the people who brought it to life. Years later, when reflecting on the film at various intervals, the Hogan-Kozlowski romance remains as one of its major backstories. What was once seen in chemistry on the big screen blossomed into an enduring marriage, earning their love one of the most celebrated Hollywood romances that grew out of a film set. Meet the bushman who inspired Mick. When audiences first met Mick Crocodile Dundee on the big screen, many assumed he was simply a colorful creation dreamed up by Paul Hogan and his writing team. But behind the larger-than-life character stood a very real figure. Rod Ansell, an outback bushman whose extraordinary life provided much of the spark for Dundee's rugged charm and survivalist edge. Ansell's story began in the remote Northern Territory of Australia, where he lived a life far removed from the comforts of city living. In 1977, he set out on what was supposed to be a short fishing trip along the Fitzmaurice River. When his boat capsized and drifted away, he suddenly found himself stranded, miles from civilization, with little more than a rifle, a knife, and a bedroll. For 2 months, he endured a test of human endurance that would later inspire headlines and fascination across the country. To survive, Ansell drank cow's blood and ate insects, reptiles, and whatever small game he could catch. He relied on bushcraft passed down through generations of Aboriginal knowledge and honed by years of living close to the land. At one point, he fashioned makeshift tools and even turned to drinking muddy water filtered through his shirt to quench his thirst. This resilience captured Australia's imagination, and he became a minor celebrity when he later recounted the ordeal in interviews and a book. Paul Hogan, already by then a fast-rising television comedian, purportedly heavily referred to Ansell's persona in shaping Crocodile Dundee. The image of his hard but good-natured bushman, able to laugh at the face of difficulties and taking every challenge as an adventure, came right from Ansell, the legend. The relaxed bravado with which he lounges in the bush and shrugs off danger was real, for it was real with Ansell. But while Mick Dundee sailed off, arms and fame wide, into the madding crowd, the reality of Ansell's life turned into an onslaught of shadows. Amidst poverty and isolation, tyranny, and a series of unfortunate troubles with the law, he became progressively more unstable. In 1999, his story met an end violently with a police shootout, leaving a dark shadow over the formerly loved and laughed at legend. The contrast really is stark between the cheerful bushman of the movie and the man who inspired him. Crocodile Dundee stands as an icon of Australian guts and humor, while Rod Ansell's tale reminds the world that, on the whole, real life doesn't match up to Hollywood endings. But without Ansell's story of survival, there might never have been a Mick Dundee for the world to meet. And movie history would have been the poorer for it. Hogan's gamble that made history. When Crocodile Dundee premiered in 1986, many assumed it was the product of a big Hollywood studio, polished and pushed into the global spotlight. In reality, the film was anything but a traditional studio project. Paul Hogan, the man who played Mick Dundee and co-wrote the script, took a massive personal gamble when he decided to finance the movie himself, after nearly every studio in America and Australia turned him down. Before Dundee, Hogan was already well known in Australia, though mainly as a comedian and TV personality. His variety show, The Paul Hogan Show, had made him a household name in his home country, where he charmed audiences with sharp sketches and a lovable, cheeky persona. But while Hogan had charisma and comic timing, Hollywood executives weren't convinced he could carry a feature film. When he pitched Crocodile Dundee, the response was tepid at best. Studio executives worried that the concept was too weird, too local, and too Aussie to appeal to international audiences. That kind of rejection would have seen the project put to bed, at least for most of the people. Not so Hogan. With strong belief in the story's potential, he and his partners found the cash themselves. Along with his longtime collaborator, producer John Cornell, Hogan managed to put together a very small budget of about 8.8 million Australian dollars, raised from private investors and Australian backers. This was indeed a bold move. It is almost unheard of for a comedian without any major film credentials to risk his reputation and finances on an attribute he had originally foreseen for himself as a debut feature film. And it became a gamble. It paid off in ways no one could have conceived. Crocodile Dundee became a household name in the entire world, first in Australia, and then it spread far and wide. Such an adventure out there in the boonies, fish-out-of-water humor, and the charming comic-style appeal of Hogan are just irresistible for audiences. The result was a film that grossed an incredible over $328 million at the box office globally, making it the highest-grossing Australian film ever, as well as one of the most successful comedies of the decade. Just beyond the obvious charm of Hogan's penetration of this daring decision, the ripple effect created can hardly be overstated, particularly since, by underwriting the movie himself, he not only assured creative control, but also positioned Australian cinema firmly on the world map. The film paved the way for other Australian filmmakers, especially in the sense that authentic local stories can make quite a hit internationally. Looking back, the dismissals of the studios almost seem comical. What they considered too Aussie actually became the movie's big card. Hogan's interpretation of Mick Dundee was real, raw, and, above all, out of his own sense of humor. By trusting his instincts and holding his ground, Hogan didn't just make a hugely commercially successful movie, he made cinematic history. Why America Lost 60 Dundee Jokes. One of the most surprising behind-the-scenes facts about Crocodile Dundee is that the version seen by American audiences was not the same film Australians watched. When the movie was first screened in its original form, Hollywood distributors worried that much of the humor, rooted in Australian slang, cultural references, and wordplay, would go over the heads of US moviegoers. Their solution? Trim or alter over 60 lines of dialogue effectively reshaping the film to fit American ears. The differences were not huge in terms of story, but they were significant in tone. Words and phrases like fair dinkum, a classic Australian expression meaning genuine or authentic, were dropped entirely. Jokes that played on Aussie idioms or referenced Australian politics and geography were rewritten or removed. Even subtler moments, like Mick Dundee's offhand bushman slang, were simplified to ensure laughs didn't get lost in translation. To the producers, these changes were a practical move. After all, the goal was to introduce Dundee to a global audience, not to confuse them. American test audiences reportedly responded better to the edited version, laughing more consistently when the cultural barriers were smoothed over. From a business perspective, it worked brilliantly. The US release was a box office juggernaut, making more than $174 million domestically and helping push the film's global earnings past $300 million. But while Australians saw differently, the fans of the original version felt something had been gained and lost, an authenticity that was equally part of the charm of the movie. For Australians, humor lay not just in the jokes themselves, but even harder in the way those jokes were delivered with absolutely no apologies, set to the rhythm of Australian phrasings. It sounded a little watered down with less Crocodile Dundee in it, and a bit more of Hollywood Dundee. The interesting thing is that this contention on the two versions has endured for decades. Many Australians still hold very firmly that the uncut release is the real film, while many international viewers, most of whom have ever seen an edited version, hold it to be the one and only definitive version. For film historians, it is a compelling example of the way cultural translation operates in cinema, and what is guaranteed to bring a laugh in one nation may just get a dim stare in another, with compromises sometimes determining success. That is somewhat ironic because, even with all the cutting, Dundee's almost oversized personality still registered in the minds of the Americans in just the way Hogan intended. The essence of the character, i.e., the bushman with charm, humor, and survival instincts, was all that came shining through, suggesting that even in the face of the loss of 60, the spirit of the entire movie remained unshakable. Before you think Hollywood had the final say, the next story shows who really called the shots. Hogan's hat became iconic. Few movie props are as instantly recognizable as Mick Dundee's rugged leather hat. With its broad brim, weathered look, and crocodile tooth band, the hat became just as iconic as the oversized knife, or Mick's outback swagger. But what most audiences don't realize is that the hat wasn't some carefully crafted costume design dreamed up by wardrobe. It was Paul Hogan's own personal hat, something he had worn for years before the cameras ever started rolling. When production began, costume designers suggested creating a new hat for Hogan to wear. Their reasoning was straightforward. A custom-built version would photograph better under lights, could be duplicated for backup, and would ensure continuity across long days of filming. Hogan, however, wasn't convinced. He insisted that his real hat had the exact look and feel the character needed. It wasn't just a piece of clothing to him, it was an extension of Mick Dundee's persona, broken in and molded by years of real use. The wardrobe department eventually relented, but not without compromise. To avoid disaster if Hogan's original hat was damaged or lost, they created multiple replicas modeled after it, down to every crease and scuff. During actual filming, Hogan sometimes wore the replicas for wide shots or stunt-heavy moments. But between takes, and in many close-ups, he returned to his own trusted hat. It carried a sense of authenticity that couldn't be faked, and Hogan believed audiences would feel the difference. And so, the decision was indeed a masterstroke. The hat became so iconic that it almost codified an international view of the Aussie bushman look. Even people who never saw Crocodile Dundee recognized the silhouette of Hogan in that hat, tall, smiling, and carrying a knife. For Hogan, it was validation that sticking to his instincts, just as he somehow found the courage to self-finance the darn thing, had paid off yet again. Hogan's hat had, over the years, entered a life of its own, exhibited in displays and fashion trends dancing around it. It existed not merely as a costume, but as a genuine artifact of Hogan's life, interwoven in the DNA of the character he created. It really represented the entire film, real, rough around the edges, and unapologetically Australian. So while parts of Hollywood may have polished and repackaged portions of the film for audiences overseas, Mick Dundee's hat was the real deal, right from Hogan's own head, laden with dust, sweat, and stories from the outback. New Yorkers believed Dundee was real. When Crocodile Dundee shifted its story from the Australian outback to the bustling streets of New York City, it created some of the film's funniest fish-out-of-water moments. But what's remarkable is that the line between fiction and reality blurred in unexpected ways. Paul Hogan, dressed as Mick Dundee in his trademark vest, boots, and leather hat, wasn't just convincing on camera. He was so believable that real New Yorkers mistook him for an actual bushman wandering through their city. During breaks in filming, Hogan would often remain in costume while walking between sets. Crowds in Manhattan, not realizing they were watching a movie star at work, assumed he was simply a colorful foreign visitor. His sun-weathered skin, easy grin, and distinctive outfit stood out against the backdrop of suits, taxis, and skyscrapers. Passers-by approached him with genuine curiosity, asking for directions, travel advice, or even tips about hunting and survival. Hogan, never one to miss a laugh, leaned into the confusion. Rather than breaking character and explaining that he was filming a movie, he often played along, answering questions with the same charm and wit he gave to Dundee on screen. To many pedestrians, it must have felt like stumbling into a living piece of folklore, a real Australian adventurer loose in the concrete jungle. It again brings to our mind not only the actor's commitment to the role in playing the character, but also the fact that the character itself was such a believable creation. Mick Dundee was more than just a caricature and a joke at the expense of Australians. He was portrayed as a real, accessible, and larger-than-life human being. That believability made it quite easy for strangers to imagine that a man like him could exist. For Hogan, amusing and reaffirming moments shocked him and assured him that this was indeed a barometer of how his perceptions of the Aussie bushman would cross over. In such a case, hardened New Yorker could view him in such a light. Audience elsewhere surely would as well. And indeed, when the movie came into the public eye, foreign viewers took in Dundee as though he materialized into their metros straight from the outback. Almost poetic, really, in retrospect, the fact that Hogan was mistaken for some kind of real bushman. The very premise of this movie was to drag that wild spirit from the Australian outback into the heart of suburbia. For some unsuspecting New Yorkers, it proved to be rather not just a movie. Why? The subway scene felt real. The closing scene of Crocodile Dundee is one of the most touching and memorable moments in the film. Set in a crowded New York subway station, it shows Mick and Sue finally confessing their feelings for each other in a way that's heartfelt, messy, and uniquely human. For many viewers, the scene stands out as a perfect blend of comedy and emotion, capturing the clash of cultures while also delivering a timeless, romantic payoff. What makes it even more powerful is that the inspiration came directly from Paul Hogan's own life. Hogan once recounted that the idea stemmed from a real experience he had in a busy train station. He was trying to say goodbye to someone, but the sheer crush of people made it impossible to get close. The chaos, the noise, and the frustrating inability to bridge the gap left a lasting impression on him. Years later, when crafting the screenplay for Crocodile Dundee, he drew on that memory to shape the climactic scene. In the film, Sue rushes after Mick, who believes their romance is over. She finds him in the subway station, but the crowd is too thick to reach him. Instead, she shouts her feelings across the platform, and he responds in kind. Their words relayed person to person by strangers until the message reaches him. It's a beautiful example of how human connection can triumph even in the most impersonal and overwhelming settings. Because it feels real, the tension between Mick and Sue, standing feet away in a crowded subway station, silent and uncomfortably looking down before initiating the long kiss. Unlike most romantic comedies shot in Hollywood that conclude with sweeping orchestral scores and grandly staged reunions, the scene was clumsy and disorganized, exactly how genuine life is. That's what makes these kinds of endings resonate. By looking at something he had experienced personally, Hogan wrapped in an element of bona fide truth that the film fans immediately associated with. The subway ending can also be read as emblematic of the film's larger themes. Throughout the tale of the film, Mick Dundee is at home in the outback, where he knows every sound, track, and shadow. But in New York, it's as if he's a misplaced person, threading his way through a jungle of steel and strangers. By concluding the film in one of the busiest and most uncomfortable urban spaces in the world, Hogan illustrated how love can break barriers of cultural, geographical, or merely composed of a group of people standing in the way. For a lot of Crocodile Dundee fans, this scene was something from the heart of the man from down under. It gave the film a soul very much its own, from Hogan's own life assimilation, such that audiences left the theaters not only laughing, but with a smile that warmed their hearts fully. The buffalo that stole the scene. One of the most iconic moments in Crocodile Dundee is the unforgettable scene where Mick Dundee raises his hand and seemingly hypnotizes a massive water buffalo into standing perfectly still. For audiences, it looked like pure bush magic, a playful exaggeration of the legendary skills attributed to outback survivalists. But behind the camera, that moment was far from simple trickery, and it wasn't achieved with animatronics or movie sleight of hand. It was real thanks to the cooperation of an actual buffalo and a little help from a veterinarian. The filmmakers initially struggled with the sequence because buffaloes, by nature, are unpredictable animals. The crew discovered early on that no amount of training could guarantee the animal would remain still long enough for the cameras to capture Hogan's slow, deliberate hand gesture. Every time the cameras rolled, the buffalo would shift, shuffle, or move away, ruining the carefully staged shot. Rather than replacing the animal with a fake or cutting the scene entirely, the crew decided on a more practical and humane solution. A wildlife specialist lightly sedated the buffalo to calm it. The sedative didn't knock the animal out, but simply made it drowsy enough to stay in one place. With the buffalo relaxed, Hogan was able to hold his dramatic pose, palm extended, for just long enough to convince audiences that Dundee truly had some mysterious hold over the creature. Just taking the right timing, Hogan had to do the act fast before the animal could shake off the drowsiness. The result felt real, magical, and incredibly funny at the same time. The audience believed that they actually witnessed bushman sorcery, but were actually witnessing a perfect balance of veterinary science, careful planning, and acting skill. That scene became one of the most memorable images in the film, played up in trailers and promotional material. In many ways, it encapsulated everything audiences loved about Mick Dundee. His own tough confidence, his own sense of belonging with the land, and the ability to deal with things that terrify others. These days, fans still mention that buffalo scene as a prime reason Crocodile Dundee stands alone among the comedies of its time. Instead of really going that route, the filmmakers sucked up the random nature of the real outback, matched with practical and real usage. That sleepy buffalo was not just a set dressing, it became a legend of the cinema itself. Just when the crew thought they'd seen it all, something unexpected crawled onto the set. Uninvited croc scare on set. While Crocodile Dundee featured plenty of fake crocodiles created through movie magic, not every reptile encounter was make-believe. During filming near a remote river in Australia's Northern Territory, the cast and crew had a startling reminder that the outback doesn't always cooperate with Hollywood schedules. One day, as cameras rolled and actors prepared for a scene, a real crocodile wandered onto the set, lured by the smell of leftover food. At first, crew members thought someone was joking. After all, most of the crocs they had worked with up to that point were mechanical props or carefully managed shots of real reptiles filmed under controlled conditions. But when the water began to ripple and a dark, scaly figure emerged, the laughter stopped. Standing face to face with one of the very animals the movie was built around gave everyone a new appreciation for the dangers of filming in the wild. The uninvited visitor disrupted production for the entire day. Cast and crew scrambled to safety while animal handlers and local wildlife experts assessed the situation. Though no one was harmed, the incident underscored how risky it was to shoot on location in the Australian bush. Unlike a Hollywood backlot, this was the croc's natural territory, and the film team had inadvertently set up camp right in the middle of it. The scare forced the production crew into tighter safety protocols from then on. Armed personnel were stationed at the rivers and water holes to prevent any injuries or interruptions from wildlife during the shooting operations. Even with that assurance, knowing that a crocodile was in real proximity would ratchet up the tension during filming. So, if you ever thought the filming incident with the real crocodile only added to the film's rolling mythology, imagine this. Audiences already felt that Dundee's world was rife with lurking dangers and fearless bush skills, and then that the cast actually faced those dangers. This perception would suspend the barrier between fiction and reality. Paul Hogan later joked that the crocodile was just jealous. It wanted its share of the screen time. So the whole incident gets entered into the other weird but true facts about Crocodile Dundee. It testifies not only to the realness of actors working in the Australian wilderness, but also to the untamed spontaneity that accompanies working in proximity to Mother Nature. For every rigged stunt and elaborately choreographed scene, there would be a fitting eternal reminder of one real crocodile's spur-of-the-moment entrance, an uninvited guest in the filming that left no Hollywood set casting rebuttal about why Mick Dundee's world just felt raw and so real. It was the kind of danger no script could plan for, and no actor could rehearse. In the end, the crocodile gave the production something priceless: authenticity that no special effect could ever match. And that's the dark side of Crocodile Dundee. 10 secrets hidden behind the laughs and adventure. Which one surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more untold stories, and tap the bell so you never miss an update. And if you're ready for more, check out the next video now showing on your screen. You won't want to miss it.